In today's video, we're going to learn about getting started with GoogleMock. Just like with GTest, there's some steps we have to do in order to get that imported into our Visual Studio solution. So first, we need to create a GoogleMock project in our solution file. Then we'll add the GoogleMock reference to our unit level test project so that we can actually use GoogleMock. We'll make sure that we fix the Visual Studio 2012 incompatibility problem by setting the variadic max in the preprocessor. And then we'll add some simple mock, a simple mock and some tests to make sure things are working out. So let's go ahead and get started. First, you need to make sure that your project is set up appropriately. If we're going to be testing a project, I have 3 separate projects inside my solution file. Bitcoin here is the project that I'm going to test. Bitcoin unit level test contains the tests, and then GoogleTest contains the GoogleTest library. We need to add one more, which is called the GoogleMock. So we right mouse click on the solution, and we go down to Add, and then New Project. We'll select the Win32 project, and then we'll name it GoogleMock. Go ahead and hit OK. Then go to Next. Make sure that we select Static Library and deselect Precompiled Header, and go ahead and hit Finish. This creates the project, but it doesn't really do anything yet. We now have to point our project to where the real GoogleMock code is. Now, you should have already downloaded the code, and I suggest that you use relative paths when setting your include directories, because if you have your stuff in any kind of version control system, it handles relative paths much better than it does absolute paths. So let's go ahead and change this to a relative path. And we have the GoogleMock directory. And we have the GoogleMock include directory. And we need to also add the GoogleTest directory. In the include directory as well. Okay, now that it knows where all the header files are, we need to add some source code to the project so it knows what to compile. So let's go ahead and select our GoogleMock project, and let's go ahead and add existing items. I put my GoogleMock directory, I unzipped it in the solution file, in the solution directory, so it's easy in my version control. So let's go ahead and select the source directory, and the 2 files that we need to add to our project are gmock_main and gmock-all. Go ahead and hit those. Perfect. Now, one more thing I need to do is gmock actually has a dependency on GoogleTest. Since I already have the GoogleTest project in here, let's go ahead and add that reference. So if I go to Common Properties, Frameworks, add a new reference, let's select it GoogleTest. Say OK. Also, I need to fix the bug that's in Visual Studio 2012 and GoogleTest and GoogleMock. I need to add the variadic max to the preprocessor. So let's go ahead and add that as well. Don't forget, no spaces in preprocessor directives. If you do, weird things happen when you compile your code. Okay, now that we have that all set, let's go ahead and hit F7 to build the project. You see it's chugging away on it right now. Remember, we created a static library. It succeeded. Now that we have a static library, we can now use that static library when we're building our unit level test. So in order to take advantage of that, we need to make sure that we add the GoogleMock into the framework and references. So let's go ahead and add a new framework, a new reference, and let's add the GoogleMock reference in there. To me, it's important that you have a separate project that contains your unit level test files because it keeps your code clean. You don't have dependencies on outside things. So your code will run completely clean without unit level tests embedded in it. This way, you decouple your unit level tests from your production code. So now that I created that reference, I need to do one more thing. I need to go ahead and add the include directory so that I can see the header files where they're at. So let's go ahead and add those. They're in there. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit F7 one more time just to build things and make sure everything is still appropriate. Everything still looks great. All right, let's try some things out. Let's write our first mock. Now, mocks, as I said in the beginning, represent a class that I may depend on in my test, but I don't necessarily want to bring in the whole implementation of that class because it's outside of the scope of my unit level test. For example, if I'm testing class A and class A has dependencies on class B, I would write a mock for class B so that class A has no dependencies whatsoever on the operation of class B. So let's go ahead and add a mock. A naming convention is really important here. So we'll go ahead and hit add new, and we'll just add a header file here. And the name of the header file should be the name of the class I'm going to mock, and then underscore mock. So let's go ahead and do that. Bitcoin transaction underscore mock. All of my mocks should end with the underscore. So let's go ahead and grab that. And then let's go ahead and I'll show you an example of a mock right here. As you can see right here, class Bitcoin underscore mock. And then there's some macros here that mock defines, and we'll talk about that in our next video. Okay, now that I've mocked up a class, let's go ahead and save that. I also need to create a test. So let's create a new test case. Let's go ahead and hit new CPP file. And I'll show you some source code here on how we can use the mock that I just created. So here is that mock class that I just created. I'm just going to instantiate it like I normally would do my Bitcoin transaction, but now it's a mock. It doesn't really exist in my source code tree. This is all in my unit level test tree. And then I can call the normal macros that I normally use for tests, like assert. But there's a new one here called onCall. And onCall will allow me to specify what will happen when the method amount is called. I'm saying I'm going to return 100. Even though I set the value to 1,000, I told it to always turn 100. So we'll go into more details in the next video on how to use the mock macros. All right, let's see if this works. We'll go ahead and build it. And we'll go ahead and run our tests. Run all of our tests. And it works. So now I know that the GoogleMock project has been added to my solution, and I'm ready to get working with GoogleMock. Check out our next video. It'll go into more detail on how to use GoogleMock and the new macros that it introduces.